Gini coefficient is a very popular and very commonly used measure of income and wealth inequality. So the Gini coefficient is based on the Lorenz curve, which measures the income concentration in a society. If you remember, in a Lorenz curve, what we have is that it tells us relative to an equality line, whereby every person would earn the same amount of income, how much the X% of the population, what share of the total income goes to that fraction. Obviously, the further, the closer we get here to the origin, the closer the Lorenz curve is to the origin, the more unequal is the income distribution, because it means that a small fraction of the people earn most of the incomes. And the Gini coefficient is very simply put, just measuring or putting into a measure that is bounded between 0 and 1, the surface, twice the surface of this difference between the equality line and the Lorenz curve. Now, that means that if we have a Gini of 0, that means we have complete equality. If we have a Gini of 1, we have the greatest amount of inequality. Basically, one person earns everything, the rest earns nothing. And then we have things somewhere in between. And that is helpful because it's a measure that's bounded between 0 and 1, and we may not have a feeling for what the difference is between a Gini of 0.35 and 0.4, but we can at least compare the development of the income distribution within a society over time, as well as across societies, and for that it is really, really helpful. The good thing about it is it satisfies the Pigou-Dalton principle, so that the Gini, if you make transfers from rich to poor people, there is no change in ranking. The Lorenz curve obviously goes closer to the equality line, and so that surface becomes smaller, the Gini becomes smaller. And the other thing is that even when the Lorenz curves cross, the Gini allows you to rank that, because all we have to do is take that surface. And that surface can be measured whether those lines cross or not. So that is extremely useful. Now here, this is just to give you an impression of how useful the Gini can be for analyzing policy. So this is from the OECD income distribution database for the years 2007 to 2010. Now, for most of the listeners, this will have been in your childhood, but these were the years of the financial crisis, where there was huge changes in incomes and in income distribution. You know, lots of people lost their jobs, so they just got unemployment benefits, had a very low amount of income. And what the Gini is often used for is to see how does a development like this, like an economic crisis or a pandemic, how does that affect both pre-tax incomes, so labor incomes that people get through their work, and how does it affect post-tax income, inequality in post-tax income? Because if it turns out that inequality after taxes is hugely affected, well, that's very, very bad. But if the welfare state, if redistribution does a good job, it can actually cushion a lot of those shocks to people's jobs. That's where Gini coefficients can be quite useful. And this is what you can see here. So for each country, for each OECD country, we have here the change in the Gini in market income inequality. Okay, so if it goes up, this means market incomes are distributed more unequally. And in most countries, except for Poland, which didn't have much of a financial crisis, and the Netherlands and Czech Republic and Germany, these were the countries where there just wasn't a financial crisis really, or the crisis didn't hit those countries in any way. But in most countries that were hit by the financial crisis, there was actually a huge increase in inequality in market income. Right? Because lots of people became unemployed, so their income is zero, and then others kept their jobs, and so automatically then the inequality goes. But that's the blue bars, but you can also see those strokes here, those black ones, which give you the change in inequality in disposable income. Okay, so that's what the households actually have after taxes and transfers. And here you can see Ireland, where you had this huge shock, actually the biggest shock to market income in all of the OECD, but you actually had a very small change, very small increase only in income inequality in disposable income. Does that mean that the crisis, the crisis was harmless for people in Ireland? By no means. But from a distributional perspective, it actually shows that the welfare state worked very well and cushioned people and people's livelihoods and families from that massive shock. Okay, so income, obviously incomes went down for everyone during that time, but it was not that the disposable income went, rock bottom for those people who lost their jobs. So they were actually cushioned very much against that shock, which obviously is a very positive thing. So here you can also see the Gini in different countries. So the ESRI here in Dublin actually does very, very good work. So they almost every year have a report on inequality in Ireland where they present different measures, not only the Gini, but there's always the Gini somewhere. And you can see here the development of the Gini in Ireland, the UK, and the US. And again, the Gini in market income and the Gini in disposable income, so after taxes and transfer. And there are a few things that jump out here. So first of all, Ireland actually, in terms of market income inequality, since the financial crisis, has a greater inequality than the US and the UK. A lot of people don't know that, but it's Ireland in terms of market income inequality is in terms of in the OECD among the top countries. So it has a very unequal market income. But compared to those other countries, the tax transfer system is a lot stronger in the sense that the inequality in disposable income is actually lower than in the UK and in the US. So Ireland does a lot more redistribution through taxes and transfers than the UK would do. That's one remarkable thing. The second remarkable thing is that the Gini in post-tax and post-transfer income, so in disposable income, that Gini remained constant throughout the time of the financial crisis, right? So you have the financial crisis 2008 to 2011, and then the aftermath of it, where some of you may still remember that, house prices were at the bottom and, only slowly recovered. The economy slowly recovered in general. It wasn't exactly a time where people wanted to, lots of people had emigrated and so on. It was a time of an economic crisis. But the income distribution of disposable income remained almost constant. And that is a sign for the Irish welfare state. All its deficiencies, but it does one thing very well, which is it seems to keep the income distribution, the distribution of disposable income, pretty much constant. and that means that it fulfills some of the quite some of the principles it is based on, and in a nutshell it works.